So, good morning. Pleasure to be here today. I'm Marina Haydn. I look after circulation at The Economist. And for the last 9 months, we've been sort of keeping ourselves busy with answering the question, why does The Economist have fewer female readers than men? And what can we actually do about it? So I was tasked to lead a project straight from the very top. Our CEO and editor-in-chief decided this is something that is time to really for us to investigate. And we went off and did the homework. And it became a genuine study of cultural context so that we could introduce lasting change. So at The Economist, it's pretty standard. First, we gather the facts. Probably we spend more time on this than others. We first turn to our own glass ceiling index, which we've been publishing over the last 10 years. The glass ceiling index really looks at the position of women in society in an economic context. So what we've seen is that the gender wage gap has actually been making slow but steady progress and now has been starting to stagnate a little bit. Certainly things like the gender wage gap steps, which have recently been introduced in the UK, are going to help further. But basically, there's still a gap between what men earn and what women earn. Also, the participation rate of women in senior jobs is still hovering around 30%. And then for us, disappointingly, our readership, our paid readership, is only 25% female. And that's after we know that actually our female target audience, or basically women as a proportion of our target audience, really represent 50% of the readers that we could be reaching. And specifically, if you look at education levels, if you look at female performance in schools and universities, actually high levels of educational attainment rates are actually higher among women. So particularly disappointing. So this is making us think. So before I move on, a couple more points to say just on the female readership proportion. We could see that women would also potentially sign up but not stay as long as our male readers. And when we looked at their content consumption preferences and their other profiles, they were actually very, very similar to our male readers. So what is behind this story? Well, we know the issue of gender equality really runs deep. And looking back in the history of The Economist and our own pages, we've been published since 1843. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, women were hardly existent in our pages. In fact, we did some quantitative look at this as well. And for our first 70 years, if you just look at how often the word woman was mentioned versus the word man, it was only 10% of that. So basically, women have been a hidden part of society for a very long time. Obviously, times are changing fast. And if you look at a series, for example, like Mad Men, which is depicting women in the 60s and 70s in the United States advertising industry, there you'll see the sort of the stereotypes that are incomprehensible for us today. I mean, there you see the objectification of women in the workplace and their solid role in the domestic sphere, and that already for us, particularly in the Western world, seems almost incomprehensible. So society is changing fast. The statistics of our own glass ceiling index, however, show that it's not changing fast enough. And our mission is really to press forward for progress. So The Economist in its coverage has been pressing forward for gender equality for many, many years. And on this particular point, it's now time to simply move into the 21st century, and also in the context of our readership. So we set up a project team named The World When, a little bit of an inspirational title. This wasn't going to be the project team to sort out what's wrong with women. This was going to be the inspirational group that was going to be looking at how basically the world when gender equality is attained and the world when The Economist has a more gender-balanced readership. Of course, there are business objectives that could be sitting behind this. Obviously, our circulation will become more profitable if we're better at reaching and keeping women, because we've been, frankly, missing a huge proportion of our target audience and not converting that group of people particularly well. So, of course, you can quantify a business value to it, but we thought it's more about this is just the right thing to do. So let's figure out how we can actually become more inclusive in principle. So we started off by asking the right questions. The group, which by mention was also 100% female, went away to build hypotheses as to what could be the reasons why highly educated women that are within our target audience are not joining us and staying as readers. So we put together a list of hypotheses on what the reasons could be. We thought it could be our look and feel. It could be the fact that it could have something to do with our logo. It could have to do with the imagery that we use. It could be linked to the fact that much of the advertising that we run is targeted at men. Could it be the content itself? Could it be the format of the product? Could it be that a subscription and the way a subscription is sold is perhaps too rigid? Could it be our marketing tone of voice? So many, many questions. I think the end list came down to sort of 30 things that we really wanted to investigate. And that became effectively the context for the research that we did conduct with Ipsos. So it was more important for us to not really jump to the solution, but take the time to research, reflect, and then build this response for change. And this was an interesting part of the journey because the team that I had working on this project was really spanning commercial teams, editorial teams, all different business units from within the Economist group. And there were many in the group who, of course, got really impatient. Let's just do something. And to manage that impatience was also a challenge, but we didn't want to just launch a campaign or say we wanted to reach more women and then go off and do something. We really stop and do the homework. So we started off differently to any research project that has run at The Economist before with a semiotics analysis. And this semiotics analysis really helped us identify the cultural context of gender in society, specifically around communications. As we're a media brand, everything that we do is communicate. Our product is communication. Our journalism and the way it is written is a form of communication, plus all the marketing around it. So this academic lens of the cultural context was really important to help us understand how we are fitting within a cultural norm and what we can potentially do within that to change. So the outcome of the semiotics became the foundation for the quant and the qual, and that was the time when we were really able to then query and question our target audience and our readers on what their views actually were. So our primary insights coming out of this research were it wasn't our content and our editorial style and the way The Economist written is gender neutral. We did learn that there were some elements specifically around our marketing communications, our tone, and our positioning as being authoritative tone of voice that was not resounding with women at all. So we were very easily able to take that very clear insight and turn that into actions. So on the left, you'll see a creative asset that was also tested within focus groups. For enlightenment, look within. That very much puts The Economist on a relatively haughty position of authoritative power, and it says that we are effectively a single source of truth. We have shifted our tone and our communications approach now to put ourselves on the same level as our reader and our potential reader and talk about things like trust and help. And now we are talking about joining the subscribers that trust us to help them make sense of the world. So we're on equal footing. We're not saying that we are the best product in the world. And we are doing a better job of connecting with women in this context. Interestingly, the creative asset on the left, has just recently been launched. It's actually lifted our response rates among both men and women by 5%. And since we have introduced this change, we see that we're growing female subscribers faster than male subscribers, in fact, by double. So it's a small nuance, but it is actually leading to huge change. Broadly, you can say that we have shifted our marketing tone from being authoritative and didactic to being dialogical. So specifically, these examples that you see here were, I think, the greatest challenge. You might be familiar with the creative assets on the left, or a sense of those. This was the famous AMV White Out of Red campaign, which has gone down into marketing history as one of the best marketing campaigns in the world, and one which we are still very proud of today. But it did a fantastic job of positioning The Economist as being exclusive, but not inclusive. It was positioning us as being authoritative. If you didn't read The Economist, you were effectively lost. So to then work and create creative assets that are actually speaking to a broader target audience, speaking to both men and women, it was very important to change the tone. So most easily, start by asking questions. Ask content-related questions that are drawing people in. Isn't it time to abolish the birth penalty on this one, which we launched on Women's Day? Very hard-hitting, introducing a word that has otherwise been coined as the motherhood penalty, which was one of the key drivers of the gender pay gap. And then a little bit more playful on sexism in the city. New episodes daily, touching on the Me Too movement. So a lot of work has been done to move into talking about our marketing and creating a marketing tone which is more nuanced. Again, we didn't want to do a one-time campaign, but we wanted to embed for lasting change. Most importantly, you have to have a team that is then tasked to be looking after this for the long term. So effectively, our top management has then moved to lead this into being firmly embedded into our commercial teams, who are looking at this on a monthly basis, organizing what can be done, and we're also tracking our KPIs and reporting on it. We've also come up with something really simple, which is a marketing tone checklist. But you don't know how difficult a marketing tone checklist can be, specifically on this context. In fact, we used to have a line that said, ensure marketing assets are gender neutral. Well, yeah, that sounds good. What does that mean? Now we have a checklist that actually, gives really, really clear guidance on how should the brand positioning be, what tone should we be taking, how careful do we need to be with humor, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very detailed list of effectively how to communicate in an inclusive way. So in conclusion, we're working to, when the world will become a more gender-neutral place, and when we will have achieved what we're looking to achieve. Our business objectives are really simple. If we grow our readership from where it is today, from the 25% female readership to 27%, that's an improvement on the bottom line of £6 million. So it's kind of a no-brainer. But I'd really like to emphasize we're not doing this because of the money. We're doing this because it's simply right, and it's time for The Economist to change with the culture and the changing times in culture, and support in pushing forward for progress, as we do in our editorial, and now we'll have our marketing communications to match. Thank you.